Okay, Math 200. This is notes packet. We're looking at section 5.5. That's page 8 on the note packet. So we're looking at greatest common factor. When we think about greatest common factor, that is the largest number that will come out of both of these numbers. So some people are really good at this. They can look at that like 12 and 8 and just say, oh, the GCF, that's 4. 4 is the biggest number that'll come out of both of those. If that didn't just jump out at you, what you can do is you can break it down into its prime factors. That's 2 times 2 times 3. Those are all primes. 4 times 3 is 12. 8 breaks down into 2 times 2 times 2. When you're then looking for the greatest common factor, you're looking for what they have in common. So they both have a 2. We'll take a 2. They both have another 2. We'll take a 2. And then that's it. That's all they have in common. So we put down 4 for the greatest common factor. All right. Between 7 and 20, they don't have anything in common. So the default is 1. 1 always goes into everything. So the greatest common factor, these are called relatively prime. It's not, this is a prime number, 7, but 20 actually breaks down. That's composite. That's 2 times 2 times 5. But they're relatively prime, meaning relative to one another, they don't have anything in common. And whenever that happens, the GCF is 1. How about variables? Well, think about it. If I break that down, that would be x, x, x. If I broke that down, there would be 7 x's. I just take what they have in common, and so it would end up being x to the 3rd. That's where the matchups would be. If we did x to the 3rd is 1, 2, 3 of them, and x to the 7th is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, there's 3 x's. That's what they have in common, x to the 3rd. Numbers and variables. So let's see, what's between 4 and 6? The GCF is 2. 2 goes into both of them. Don't say 12. 12 is very common. If you just thought 12, that's, you're thinking of the numbers they go into. We need the biggest number that goes into both of them, not numbers they go into. All right, so that is 2. And then x to the 4th or x to the 3rd, well, it's always going to be the lower power. X to the 3rd, because again, if you line them up, there's 4 of them, you line them up, there's 3 of them, and then you take what they have in common. It's always going to be the lower power. All right. Okay, then let's look at the next page. Page 9 is over here, page 9. So we want to factor out something. So I had teachers in the past say, oh, it's just the distributive property in the reverse. I really hate that because it's not just. That's like saying driving a car backwards is just not driving it forwards. It's just the opposite. It's a lot more difficult. In the same way, mathematically, it is opposite to factor as to distribute, but it's more difficult. Distributive property is easy peasy. You just multiply in what they tell you. Factoring out means you got to figure out the greatest common factor first. So that already is harder. So 6 and 9 and 12, we're looking at a 3 for the greatest common factor. And then we have x to the 3rd or x squared or x. So we're going to take the lowest power thing, x. So 3x is the GCF on this. I write that down, 3x, and then I do a big old empty set of parentheses. I'm undistributing this. So instead of taking it times this, times this, times this, I'm actually going to do the opposite. I'm going to divide. So whatever I write up front here, whatever I have factored out, I put it underneath each term. And now hopefully this will ring a bell from past chapters that we did. I think in chapter 2 you had to reduce these. So 6 divides in 3 goes into 6 twice. There's 3 x's on top. There's 1 x on the bottom. They cancel, so that's x squared. Minus, stays a minus, 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And x squared on top, x to the 1st on bottom, so there's an x left. And the x's get canceled, plus stays plus, and then 12 divided by 3 is 4. And so there's my answer. It's factored. I factored out a 3x. And I kind of anti-distributed it. So let's look at these. I have GCF of 7, and they all have an X, and they all have a Y. So I'm going to write that 7xy out front. I'm going to do a big old empty set of parentheses. And now 7xy under that, 7xy under that, 7xy under that. And reduce. 2, the y's cancel, x squared plus y's cancel. 1, right? 7 divided by 7 is 1. And x squared divided by x is just x. The y's cancel, the x's cancel. 7 divided by 7 is 1. So that's it. 2x squared plus x minus 1. Again, on my tests, I don't care if you put the 1 there. But on the online, they really don't want you to put the 1 there. All right, so now GCF here. This is crazy. The GCF is actually a binomial, x plus 2. So we write that x plus 2 out front, just like how we wrote the 3x or the 7x. I do an empty set of parentheses. But now how do I populate that parentheses? Well, I divide each term by what I wrote out front. So I put it underneath each one. That cancels. I'm left with the 6. That cancels. I'm left with the y. There's a minus in between. All right. Same dog, different fleas. We got GCF of y plus 1. Write down the y plus 1. I do an empty set of parentheses. Divide that by y plus 1. I divide that by y plus 1. So again, what is always in front of everything is that 1, right? Just like the little kid that sees dead people all the time. You see 1s all the time. It's 1. So y plus 1 times quantity xy minus 1. This one, we look at it, that doesn't have any variables, so don't even worry about the variables. 3, 18, 15, and 90, I think 3 is the GCF. And now we just divide each one of those by 3. So we end up with, let me scooch it over here a little. 30 plus 5y squared minus 6xy minus 1 xy squared. We'll just say xy squared. End parenthesis. Okie dokie. So the next thing we're going to look at is factor by grouping. So factor by grouping is just basically doing factoring out the greatest common factor 3 times in a row. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. All right. So we've got 15x3 minus 10x2 plus 6x minus 4. And we've got 2a squared plus 5ab plus 2a plus 5b. And we've got x to the third plus 4x plus x squared plus 4. Okay, so when we're factoring by grouping, there's 4 terms. And what we're going to do is just factor the GCF out of just the first 2. So we look at just the first 2 terms. That'll be a 5x squared will come out. And we put a set of parentheses there, so we divide this by 5x squared, we divide this by 5x squared. Here, I'll change up colors, I'll make it blue on the inside. Thank you, C3PO. 3x minus 2. Okay. On the next one, this plus is still there. Don't forget that plus. That gets overlooked a lot. Be careful not to forget the little plus there. And now we factor out. What can we factor out of 6? That we can also factor out of 4. That would be a 2. We divide that by 2. We divide that by 2. And again, we end up with 3x minus 2. So now look, 3x minus 2. It's like a magic trick. You factor something out of the first two, factor something out of the second two, and now for the finale, you're going to factor out the binomial. So I'm going to pull this 3x minus 2 out. And what's going to be left? Well, I don't know. Let's divide that by 3x minus 2. Let's divide that by 3x minus 2. And so we end up with 5x squared plus 2. And it's factored. Okay, I kind of smooched these a little. So let's see. What can we factor out of those two? The GCF is A. So we end up with, what do we end up with inside there? 2a plus 5b. These two are relatively prime, so that plus is still right there. There's nothing in common, so 1 is the default GCF. And so that ends up as 2a plus 5b. And now 2a plus 5b, 2a plus 5b. We'll pull that out front. And then we'll be left with a plus 1 inside. All right. And the last one, we're going to GCF factor out the greatest common factor. Oh, I didn't show my work. Sorry. Here, let me 2a plus 5b. 2a plus 5b. I thought that one went too fast. And there's the a plus 1. All right, you don't have to show that work. After you get this down, you can just put down the answer and not show the division of the binomial. All right, so x comes out. You get x squared plus 4. Those are relatively prime, so 1 comes out. You get x squared plus 4. And now we've got that x squared plus 4 in common. And so x plus 1 left. All right. And 1, 2, 3, 4 more problems. Gotta rearrange some stuff.